So Hunter x Hunter chapter 408 is officially out, and once more, giant information broking of just multiple pieces of information laid out in front of us. We get to learn more about Morena and her origins, how she developed her Nen ability. We actually get to learn a bit more about specific aspects of Nen types, especially specialists, as well as why I can't pronounce things. Borskin was essentially decided upon to be taken in by Morena, and we'll learn a bit more about this negotiation game and how things pertain as things progress forward. And a pretty shocking event happens at the tail end of this chapter that I cannot wait to get into because it has massive implications for how things can happen in the future of the story. But before we jump into things, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. Moving on with the chapter, we actually get to start the negotiation game, and Borskin actually picks the aim card, which allows her to essentially get an idea of what Morena's goals are. Now, what's interesting is that they can have ideal chit-chat between each rounds that doesn't pertain to any of the games. So Borskin ends up using it to determine, pretty on the nose, that Morena's forces are less than 50, about half of that, so really good deductive work on her part. And so Morena ends up asking and says that her main goal is to destroy Kakin, and eventually destroy humanity is how things end up being progressed even further. But the thing I kind of like is that, essentially, Morena doesn't exactly give too much into details for this aspect, and so she has to explain even further. And this is where we end up going into the dark origins of Morena and even darker histories of the Kakin Empire. Also, I just like how in this brief comedic panel where Borskin's like, I kind of need more information, shows that perhaps all it really took, if this game was done multiple times to recruit new members, that nobody really further asks for more information other than Morena wanting to destroy Kakin, or further elaboration on her goals and her origins and all that stuff. So, very possible this is the first time she's experienced somebody needing more information. So that's interesting to know. So, Morena ends up basically showing us what the darker side of the Kakin Empire is. Apparently that she is a carnival orphan, and that there's this thing called the Carnet Levare. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think it's, tell me, well, I think it's French. Apparently there's a festival that happens in a randomly picked village in the Kakin Empire where the royal family, as well as their confidants and close people to the royal family, go to and sort the people of that village to between entertainers or others. And it's very, very heavily implied that since they're called entertainers, some things happen in this instance, and not good things. I'm not going to say this fully because, let's face it, this video will probably get demonetized by just talking about this stuff. But essentially, afterwards, there was a lot of newborn babies after this event. And so, the carnival orphans are born at this place that is essentially a hospital that's run by the human traffickers, run by the Haili, and this is where the mothers were treated, and thus the children were divided into second-track fakers, aka illegitimate heirs to the throne that end up getting the slashes on their face and eventually are turned into the future heads of the mafia family. And then, pretty graphic term, flesh. The other children are designated as flesh, which is what Morena is. And what's interesting is that as this was being explained, Morena led up with the full-on reveal that she is not the real Morena Perdeaux. In fact, she somehow got to fake her own death and take the place of the real Morena and is now leading the Haili family. So a couple of chapters ago, when Nobunaga surmised that the actual head of the Haili isn't the actual head of the Haili that was to begin with, again, the man's spot on. I swear, we need to get like a comedy spin-off of the Detective Nobunaga. Anyway, back to the chapter. The whole implications of this is that the people who are designated as flesh grew up in very abusive, very not too great circumstances, and Togashi kind of uses a piece of raw steak and a knife cutting into the middle of it to kind of basically showcase a visual metaphor of what potentially happened. And Morena went through all this stuff for 20 years. And she was considered flesh for 20 years, until eventually she became the boss of the Haley family due to varying circumstances. And she ended up, throughout her years fulfilling this role of hers as flesh, she discovered her Nen ability, and so bit by bit she honed it, and it served as a way for her to plot her whole destruction plan of the Kaking Empire. And here's the thing. The way this is being presented, Morena ended up learning her Nen ability and awakening it all on her own without any outside interference, which is relatively rare to happen. Usually there has to be some sort of outside interference, being attacked with an attack from Nen, or being forced or taught to do it through years of training. But Morena managed, through all her life experience, managed to realize her abilities and create her ability Contagion over the years, little by little, until she took the place of the Haley leader. Now, apparently it's also stated that this carnival happens irregularly, and the last one happened 2 years ago, and this could also imply that other princes that we know of, that we might think, oh, they might not be so bad, might have taken place and took a part into this festival. So we gotta look at all the princes a lot differently now. Now, something I looked over was the, let's say, Majesté, which is essentially a term used for people that did great offense to the crown or the whole ideals of Kakin. That would be like pure treason, even by today's standards, which is crazy to think about for that empire. So even the littlest thing could get them executed. There's also a piece of information that there's been 7 batches of these flesh children from this festival. So, yeah, that's a lot of stuff that happened. But yeah, the whole idea is that the festival is still going on, even when the whole democratization of Kakin began. So fully utilizing the fact that Morena is just nailing home that Kakin ain't changing anytime soon, and the dark side and all that stuff that's been going on is still happening and will probably never change, which is why destruction is its basic next natural course. And to do that, she needed to find people that would help her achieve her goals with special abilities. And she says that Borkson has a very critical ability and critical role, and that's why she went out to essentially recruit her. Now, obviously, Borkson asks why Morena believes it's her, but Morena says that she has to pick another specific card, question A most likely, to get full-on answers. The cards are then shuffled, as we then end up getting Borkson getting a card picked from her stack by Morena, and it's revealed that the Joker card was taken. And this isn't too big of a loss for Borkson, as yes or no, as established in the previous chapter, could just be a death sentence for her regardless. So that being taken out of the equation isn't a major loss. So she's getting closer and closer to getting the cards that she needs to kind of get out of this game. And after her Joker is taken, Borkson ends up taking the power card from Morena in order to get more of an explanation of her abilities. Also, I just find it's kind of adorable that Morena is actually just straight up just flattered by the fact that Borkson twice in a row wants to know more about her. With her backstory, it kind of shows that she's not used to people ever really asking more about her. So we end up going into a bit of a crash course, at least crash course on what Nen is, to explain it to Borkson and the abilities, and she doesn't really know more above the fact that it's technically superpowers. And so we go over the basics of awakening Nen and specific attributes and abilities, and thus Morena ends up explaining what her ability is. And she even confirms there are 22 people currently as players in her ability in this game that she's created using her ability, and that they level up, and so they eventually end up getting more people that she kind of classifies as children and growing their own families from it. She rightfully calls it a type of pyramid scheme, which, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Though this is another thing, because apparently their goals and attributes are meant to help assist her in developing her abilities, and she also wants to help develop their own abilities by awakening them. But a key piece of information that obviously Borkson wouldn't be privy to is the fact that Morena conveniently left out how people level up, grow stronger, and eventually end up gaining Contagion, Patience Zero, and doing all that to make more people with Awakening Nen abilities, which is the killing to level up. So, yeah, very convenient piece of information to leave out, which is very smart. As we established previously, Morena can be very selective on her information, give enough information to just straight out mislead them, give enough truthful information, but leave out key instances that wouldn't be picked up upon even throughout this conversation. Now, throughout this whole thing, Boren is being like, I don't want this nation to basically cease to exist. Responsibilities, national responsibility, defense, doesn't really mean much to her. She just wanted to coast through life and just do what she wanted to do. She thought that she was going to end up going into a role as a instructor at a military school, like how she was expecting things to go with King, how it's been. But then Beyond showed up, wanted to go to a new continent, the Dark Continent, and kind of breaking what she initially planned her life to be. And so she doesn't want King to end, because the possibility of her getting that life might end up happening in the future. And I also like how, well, Morena ends up explaining more that the larger goal here is that they have in common is killing people in general, directly or indirectly, and so they all have different reasons and circumstances, targets and quotas, and those are the small goals that lead up to the larger goal, which will end up being more so destroying humanity. So that is her main thing for Morena. But I like how Boren, throughout this conversation, is kind of disgusted, but also relieved that she cannot relate to anybody like Morena or her goals. And so she has to get out of this messed up situation as quickly as possible. Now, in terms of like the different categories of Nen, we actually get confirmation that Boren would fall under a specialist type of Nen user. Someone that is capable of using every form of Nen if they train properly. Obviously going over how Dogman found her. He's an enhancer, enhancing his sense of smell to find people and their Nen affinities and what types they'll end up being able to awaken to. And so Morena ends up diving deeper and deeper into how rare these specialists tend to be by giving a number as like 1 in, I believe, 3,000, which is the closest we ever get to a hard number or percentage of specialists. And so Boren is like a smaller group of people that will be considered specialists. Heck, Morena even says that Boren doesn't technically need to be there right now because there's the possibility of 50 or even 60 more people that could potentially be specialists if they awaken Nen are on the ship right now. So even if they fail with Boren, they still potentially have more people to essentially recruit. And even now, they're actively looking for more people to recruit aboard the ship. Heck, they even point out that one of the people that they ended up discovering was Chrollo in the crowd, which even in this instance, the amount of just auras and just presence that a specialist has is insane. Heck, almost every single arc in the story, from like York New onwards, outside of Great Island, there's been a specialist. The specialists are always just some of the most incredibly dense character abilities and have like their own relevancy in the story to shake things up with how insane their abilities can in fact be, whether they be super major or like relatively minor, until we really dive deeper into things. And so Morena ends up explaining more about Nen abilities, Nen affinities, and how specific people end up learning the limitations and powers of their own individual typings, and how specific Nen types are harder for others if they're too far away from where they are in the Nen tree. Possibility is harder for them to learn, like Transmuter can have a harder time learning a manipulation ability, so on and so forth. And even goes over the fact that specialists might not even realize once they awaken Nen that they are specialists, and so they'll focus on one thing, like let's say enhancer abilities, and in which case, by the time they realize, oh, they can do more abilities, it's too late, and though it'll be harder for them to learn like a hybrid ability or the multiple aspects of an ability, which showcases that it is possible for specialists to be relatively weaker if they focus on one singular Nen attribute for their ability, even if they do make it stronger. And the fact that Morena is also a specialist that she does reveal in this instance, that's just crazy to really consider, because as she said, she honed her ability bit by bit, which means her specialist ability might have perfectly encompassed every instance of the Nen tree, which means that she's probably the best specialist or Nen user in the story, which is insane to think about with all that to happen. And she awakens her Nen without any of the other previous ways of awakening Nen. So, yeah, that's pretty insane. And Morena kind of wants anybody that's a specialist or has potential of awakening and becoming a specialist so that she can actually help lead them to choose a specific ability that will help her in her goals. So, yeah, that is really, really interesting. Now we move on to the next card, and Boren ends up losing the Yes card. And that is disappointed for everyone, including the people in the room. which ends up relating to the fact that there is no cheating, and they didn't expect any cheating as well. And we get more information on what happens if Borkson picks the no card. And so Morena essentially states that it's the difference between like the X and the no is that it's a firm stance of, yeah, no willingness to work together, and she rejects everything. But this would essentially make the fact that her and everybody she knows will be more or less considered flesh to Morena and her group, basically making them farming material to level up. And so that will definitely make things a lot more difficult. And yeah, that's essentially a death sentence, as we all kind of assumed. They're not going to redo the game until Borkson ends up, well, agreeing. Since we now know that there are more options for new specialist users to enter the Haley family to help out Morena. So Borkson, if she ends up fully declining, then she's dead. Full on. And that's the trap. Yes, no, Joker, doesn't matter. It all leads to her eventual death or joining of the Haley family. But I do like how Morena states full on that the X card will remain the same. If she ends up getting the X card at the end of the day, the game is revoked. Her memory, Borkson's memories won't be erased. She'll still get the information that she's learned about the Haley family and their goals and Morena's ability. So that way she can just leave and no one will end up being attacked. Anybody that she knows won't be full-on attacked by Morena and her family. Now, obviously, the fact that she wants to destroy all of humanity eventually, that just means prolonging their deaths to an extent. But that is a plus. She could still share the information. And this, throughout this whole conversation, ends up leading to the full-on confirmation, as we all thought, that the negotiation game with these cards is, in fact, a net ability. Obviously, high risk, high reward, no cheating, thus requiring some risk involved to increase the power of the net ability, aka the negotiation game, to make things as fair as possible, which means this might be part of Contagion, a subsection of Contagion, which is why we got more explanations on how specialists tend to work and how we get stronger specialists that can specialize in all these different typings, and the bit of information that Morena does, in fact, and did work around her ability to improve it bit by bit over the last 20 or so years. So, yeah, I like this confirmation. But it could also be a bit of a misdirect. It could just be one of the other people, maybe the people in the room shuffling the cards, and that's their ability for all we know. But I like the idea that this is part of Morena's ability, which makes her even more deadly, and makes this type of ability even deadlier than I initially thought. But that's basically it for what we get for the card game for this chapter, as we move on to the next card to be picked. And we then end up getting the X card removed next, which leaves only the no card, which is instant death, and then return, which means survival. Meaning that Borkson, if she is left with the return card, can in fact get back X and void the game, get out of there, and share her information. So there's a 50-50 shot of what happens now. But before the game continues, before Borkson can even pick another one of Morena's cards for more questions and to further elaborate more stuff, we hear a huge announcement enacting martial law on the Black Whale, ending the chapter. And this is major, because the fact that we got martial law enacted in the end of this chapter means that over the course of this game, this meeting, between the end of the procession and now, something happened. Now, we all know the only real things that could potentially happen for this to be the case is if one of the three princes that are the benefactors of the Mafia families, Sragnik, Luzris, or Zhang were killed. And my money is on Luzris being killed, or even an attempted assassination attempt, because we have all that stuff going on with Melody, leading to Benjamin enacting martial law, going through the courts and all that shit. Or, which might be a long shot, maybe Zhang Lei might be the one that died. Because over the last batch of chapters, we've had a lot of focus on Zhang Lei's coins from his Nen Beast. What if that eventually led to his death? What if that was part of his life force, and giving them out actually depletes his life, and maybe even leads to bad luck or bad karma in the future and led to his death? I just find it suspicious that we're focusing a lot on this aspect of the Nen Beast's ability, and now we're getting martial law declared. The pieces feel like it might lead into that direction, because while Luzris seems like the most obvious option, I wouldn't be surprised if Zhang Lei was killed over the course of these last few hours. Also got Kurapika's Nen class going on, so whatever happened there might have enacted the martial law for all we know. There's other factors, but it's mainly what happened in these last couple of hours that determine what in the hell is going on next. And I am insanely excited to see how this plays out in the future. We also got Hulkenberg doing what he's doing, so yeah, so much stuff is going on right now, and this arc, I doubt this arc's ending within the batch of chapters that Togashi is currently writing, because a lot of pieces and plot threads, while converging, are definitely going to basically spin all over the place until it crashes and burns into a all-out war. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of this chapter and everything that happened in the events of it. Everything about Morena's backstory, elaboration of her abilities, the new stuff to learn about specialists and the Nen abilities, Borkson being a specialist, and also the fact that, well, martial law has been enacted. So, yeah, how do you think things are going to play out? Let me know in the comment section down below. And if you haven't already, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. With all that said and done, hope you all have an awesome day.